time.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Security Table. We're back after a midsummer break, kind of like Formula One. We take a month off to retool the cars, to get the brains moving again. But we're back again to enlighten you with, I don't know, something hopefully that's enlightening. And before we jump in too far, I want to give a quick shout out, not in a Casey Kasem top 40 kind of way, because that'd be just weird. Just weird. Some people, anybody under like 40 is like, what are they talking about? Google it. Look it up on Wikipedia. Now, this is a quick shout out to Robbie and JD, who are some of our avid fans here in the Raleigh-Durham metro area. Apparently like to get together and discuss the Security Table. So keep it up and give us some feedback and let us know what else you want to hear us talk about. But Matt, you got an issue that you want to throw on the table here. And I have a simple answer, but I'm going to let you describe it first before I just completely wrap up the episode.
Okay, this ought to be fun. So, topic for today, regression. Sorry, couldn't resist. Anyone under 40 has no idea what I just did. Regression. So regression is a word and it means something, and it is also a vulnerability and it means something. So regression, for those who don't know, I forget what the CVE is actually. It's a OpenSSH vulnerability, race condition leading to a remote code execution in the OpenSSH server. The important part, and the reason for the fancy vulnerability name that we all, naming a vulnerability is always an art and a science in and of itself. Regression. So regression means found and fixed and reopened. And that's what's happening here as well. So not only is this an OpenSSH vulnerability, which is particularly bad, but this is a fault somewhere in the supply chain that resulted in a vulnerability being opened, introduced, opened, found, closed, and then reopened and rediscovered, and recached. So that in and of itself is interesting, but it brings up some interesting questions about the nature of security updates, applying updates, keeping on the latest and greatest, bleeding edge versus, a known working configuration. And also, who should have caught that, right? Is that QA's job? Is that pentesters' job? This was rediscovered by two pen testing teams. Well, actually, I should say one, folks over at Qualys Research discovered it, but at the same time, there was our university, I forget which university it was, also rediscovered it. The OpenSSH vulnerability notice does credit both sets of researchers for finding or rediscovering this issue. But who should have found it first, right? That's really the big question.
Well, and this isn't the first time that a bug has been, air quotes, fixed and then reappeared. It happens literally thousands and thousands of times inside of big companies where things come back around, and it could be a integration problem where, depending on how you're building software, branches, could be a branch overwrite, things like that happen all the time. Much more than gets advertised.
Merging is really challenging sometimes.
Yeah, especially in non-DevOps-y kind of worlds where you're dealing in bigger changes. Like, it's one thing if you're changing 2 lines out of 2 million lines, there's unlikely you're going to get a hit. But when you're doing some type of you're creating a new software version and you're releasing once a quarter, and you have 5,000 developers all working in branches that are slowly getting merged up into trunk branches, and the train they start to consolidate in the station. There's invariably going to be something's going to get lost in that process and whatnot. So it does happen. We just don't, very seldom is it in a magnitude vulnerability like this. What were the scores on this? Is this a 10.0?
No, it's an 8.1.
Okay.
It has some mitigations built in, and it is a timing issue. It's a race condition.
It's a race condition. Race conditions are very, very hard to get all that.
Yeah.
I mean, Even reading
On the
code
plus
will
side,
get it.
yeah, on the plus side, it's all. And then if you have ASLR enabled, you have some built-in defenses. I mean, for whatever that's
Hey,
worth.
what is
And then,
ASLR? I'm curious.
Address
ASLR, what is
space
that?
layout randomization, for those who don't know, is a means for helping when you have a buffer overflow to help prevent remote code execution. It randomizes the addresses of your return pointers.
Makes it much more difficult for an attacker to get a single exploit to work over
Repeatably.
repeatably, because things are always moving around. Okay, so you want me to shut this whole thing down so we can just wrap up the episode?
Let's try.
The year is 2024. Why the heck does SSH still exist?
Oh, no,
this
no,
world.
no, no.
Why?
No, no,
Why?
no.
No. You are not going to give me a good reason in a cloud native world why I would ever need to start SSHD on a machine and somehow give somebody access into it in a cloud native world.
I'm going to tell you that perhaps it's not the best thing today, but it is definitely something that you still need running around and having access to, because when everything else fails, because your IDP failed, because something in the middle failed, there are the answers to SSH, in my experience so far, have too many moving parts that in the middle of an incident, when you absolutely need to get to a box, that's the time when they fail.
So help me understand what are the alternatives? Because from what I can recall, we have VNC, Telnet, but neither of those are really good options.
Big fan
If
of
not
bringing Telnet
SSH,
back.
if not SSH, then what?
That
In the
there's a
cloud-
bunch of
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, you go.
Okay, cloud native, right? So we're thinking cloud native world here, right?
You are.
I have access
I'm thinking about the scope of all Linux machines.
Okay, but so let's cloud native world in a modern application, you can access console services if you are still running in a console. Please don't tell me you SSH into your containers, because then I will just this will have to be called the insecurity table or the unsecurity table, right? I mean, people did that. Remember in the beginning of containers, people were like, we have to add SSHD so we can SSH into the container. Like, no, you don't understand. The essence of a container is if you don't need it, if it's broken, you just destroy it and make another one pop up. You don't ever try to fix it. But like let's just talk containerization, orchestration, Kubernetes, containers running inside of an orchestrated environment through a modern day cloud provider. Even if I did have a box like an Amazon EC2 for some reason in my architecture, I still wouldn't SSH to it over the public internet. I would use the cloud provider's tooling to be able to access the console of that device through a protected channel, which has been battle tested and hardened and everything else. And so I don't see a world where I use SSH. I don't use SSH anymore.
So I see
used
two
to.
problems with
I'd
that.
used it for decades, but I don't anymore because I just don't have any use cases for it.
I see two problems with what you just put on the table.
Okay.
First, many of those still use SSH under the hood. And second, battle tested. That's a appeal to authority fallacy. Just because it's Amazon doesn't mean that it was battle tested. Amazon still has its problems.
Of course, but it's been used at scale by thousands and thousands of customers, and so it's been tested by attackers over and over again. And there is not an exploit available that I'm aware of today that gives me full access to an Amazon. Or I'm not even. We don't even have to say Amazon. It could be Google. It could be Microsoft. It doesn't matter. Large cloud provider has thousands of customers that have been running thousands of applications for thousands of years total.
It's a very strong probability, but let's turn the clock back a bit. Millions and millions of people use every day Windows 95. Therefore, Windows 95 is a secure operating system.
Millions of people use Windows 95.
I'm bringing the clock back a couple of decades.
Okay.
So that's basically saying the same thing.
That was before Microsoft found security, though.
Yeah, but again, What you say is a very, very, very strong probability of
The
being right, but I don't
timeline-
accept it as an absolute.
Okay, but
I don't.
of course, nothing. I mean, nothing is 100% secure, right?
Yeah.
I'm just
And-
saying that it has been tested, and so I put more trust. Okay, here's a premise for you. I put more trust in the large cloud providers' console access than I do in SSHD today, from OpenSSH, just based on track record and history.
Well, I will highlight that. OpenBSD, the organization, I remember correctly, the OpenBSD was the organization that produced OpenSSH, and they have a exceedingly great track record of security vulnerabilities, especially in remote security vulnerabilities. To have this show up in SSH multiple times is really a black mark on them or the maintainers, and I hope they get their act together. I will give you that in a cloud native world, you're probably right that SSH is less prevalent, and less important, and therefore not as impactful. But there's a ton of systems out there, legacy systems, non-cloud native systems, edge devices, consumer devices, other things that have a need for SSH to exist so that you can do remote access, so you can do remote management, where all of those things are potentially impacted by this. And hopefully they're getting patched. Let's hope that that's happening.
So basically your premise is SSH is important for legacy, for things that should be
OpenSSH is
going
important
away.
for anything that is not cloud native, certainly. If you're not
Okay.
in Kubernetes, but if you are in Kubernetes, you're using SSH to manage your Kubernetes environment.
SSH is important as a common denominator.
It's a secure shell. I mean,
Exactly.
that's its
I mean,
goal.
if it's a common denominator, then we should have invested more time and money into its overall security stance.
Well,
Because
let's open
I mean,
up the
listen,
can of- do we want to open the can of worms
yeah,
of,
I mean,
of funding
I've-
of open source
listen,
projects?
I started in security and system administration in the early 90s. I've used SSH since the very beginning, and it has had a pathway of high severity, critical level remote code execution vulnerabilities. I can't remember what they're all, the names of them all, but I just remember patching SSH a lot over its lifetime, over the lifetime of using it. And so
because they've been maintaining it very well, right? Patches are not coming out reactively; they're coming out proactively.
And they are a big target because it is, I never get that word right,
ubiquitous.
It's everywhere.
It's
So,
everywhere. Yes, it is. It's in every
everywhere.
Linux distro, and many Windows systems have SSH.
But isn't there
available
something
for it.
better? Isn't there something better that we could do that
Is there?
would take out
Is there? That's the
this-
question.
Yeah, I mean, but that's if there's got to be something. There's got to be something better. There's got to be a better way to do, other than I get legacy, but legacy will go away eventually, hopefully. Never seems to though. That's the problem.
look, even if you look at the virtual KVMs and stuff like that, again, some of them,
You use
I won't say
SSH.
most of them, but some of them, they build their technology on top of SSH, like they offer all the bells and whistles, but it's on top of SSH because everybody trusts SSH.
And
I don't know that
SSH
everybody
has a ton of
trusts
capability.
SSH.
SSH
I don't
has a
trust
ton of
SSH.
capability with if you add PAM to it, right? If you have pluggable authentication modules, although I don't think PAM is used anymore. Maybe it's system D.
It is.
Yeah.
But you have the option of certificates and passwords if you want it. One-time passwords, multi-factor authentication, radius.
The only challenge is though when there's a
X11
remote code. Hold on.
forwarding.
When there's a remote code execution, it never calls the PAM module or the certificate checker or anything else. It just goes right to
Look,
the source and runs the code.
Well, that's because this is a pre-auth vulnerability. This is a pre-auth vulnerability, so it happens before the authentication flow happens. So
If we're going to throw away everything that has an RC, we're going to be standing with VI in our hands.
Awesome. I love VI.
VI or life.
VI is life. No, but seriously, so now comes the question. Vulnerabilities are a fact of life. If you are a high-profile target and SSH is as high as they come, you will be scrutinized. there's been a history both of vulnerabilities and of fixing from SSH. Most people enjoy a certain level of trust and belief in SSH. What makes SSH different from all the rest of all the other stuff that keeps having even worse vulnerabilities coming out every day? Is it because, again, as we spoke so many times, SSH is a security utility in the sense of power and water, not utility
And the
as a tool?
challenge with it is it always leads to root access.
No. Well,
you can't run, but you can't run SSH. You can't run. Can you run SSHD as a non-privileged user? Like, could you run it in such a way that you, Matt, run a copy of SSHD that's tied to your, so you never need full system access, or you never need root access?
the shell
So-
okay.
Wait, when we say SSHD, there's the official one, there are smaller versions that you can definitely run on a non-privileged port with your own UID, and those will connect only you. They are much more limited. They are not the official SSHD, so they don't come under the same scrutiny. So yes, it's possible to jail, I guess, an SSHD implementation.
And actually with SE Linux and other and jails on FreeBSD, for instance, you can restrict what resources SSHD has access to.
Yeah, but does anybody successfully use SE Linux
Well,
in a commercial context?
so you're opening yet a different can of worms.
Listen,
And
we've
oh,
been
by
off
the-
for a
and oh,
couple
by-
of weeks. Okay, I've
and oh,
had a
by the
lot
way-
of thoughts.
And oh, by the way, Kubernetes, if I recall correctly, relies on SE Linux and other
Yeah, but you don't have to.
FTP-based.
You don't have to administer it. That's somebody else figured it
Well, you
out
have to.
finally.
You do
Somebody
have to
else
administer it. It is your
Not
responsibility.
not anything that
no.
Kubernetes is doing with SE Linux. You're not. There's no way that the administrator for Kubernetes
No.
is changing SE Linux parameters.
If
Because
it
you have
is,
to have a
something is wrong.
PhD just to even consider it.
No, SC Linux in learning mode is one of the funniest things that you ever see going through your system logs.
Definitely putting the system into enforcing mode and have everything stop.
Oh yeah. No, I'm sure that I have had some Linux boxes in the past look at me and say, "What do you want from me? Why are you doing this to me? Why?
That's been my experience whenever I tried to use SE Linux. It's like you turn it on in that watching mode, and you're like, "Ooh, look at all the cool things that it's going to do."
Yeah,
And you
look
in
at all the pretty
block
permissions.
mode, and you're like, "Oh, I can't even type on the keyboard anymore. This is cool."
It's like you put it in
He's doing
learning
his
mode,
job.
and you let it run, and then you look at the box and say, "Okay, you learned it, right? So now let's enforce."
So here's a perfect use case for AI. Is that what you're saying? AI,
Oh my
generative
goodness.
AI?
Figure out the SE Linux policy that doesn't lock me out of the machine every time.
So we go back then to the thing that we were asking offline. Where's the QA in all this?
Is QA's responsibility to find regressions? So we'll even take it out of SSH's hands for a moment. Who should be finding regressions? How do regressions happen?
What is this QA
Well, when
thing
a
you talk
bug-
about?
When a bug daddy and a bug mommy love each other very much, then they commit, and it's the wrong commit, and you get a regression.
But no, I mean, honestly, what is the QA world look like these days? Like a lot of people don't have QA anymore. QA has gone away in a DevOpsy kind of world where developers are supposed to be doing their own testing, and automation testing is supposed to be ruling the way that we release software. And so QA seems like it is becoming a lost art.
Once upon a time, every developer had that Gandalf QA person that would not let them commit. Thou shall not commit, because they kept like bringing back edge cases and bits and corners that they forgot to code for.
There's a whole theory around QA testing, right? Positive cases, negative cases, boundary cases. There's a whole
basket
set of-
cases, and it's
that's what QA becomes when
Yeah,
they get into the
exactly. So everybody loved to hate on QA, right? And yeah, handles the sky, I used to. I'll be the first one to say so. But at some point, I started looking around and saying, wait, there was a function around here called QA. Where have those guys gone? And when you had a good QA person, they usually were very, very good. And they knew the system inside and out, every single bit, every single skeleton. Where are those people?
Well, I can tell you personally, as somebody who used to do QA, I joined the security team.
That's where they all went. I was wondering.
Interesting.
No, it's QA is definitely an art form, and I've found QA people to be some of the best threat modeling people
Yeah.
because they have
Yep,
a
critical
breaking
thinking.
and critical thinking
Once-
mentality, and they also tend to do their job well, have to understand the system, what you just mentioned. They have to conceptualize how everything fits together, and then they can start to come up with scenarios that sometimes developers can't see because they're looking at this little piece and the QA person was looking at the whole, everything that was around it. So, I mean, I miss QA.
But they need to do a jump in the mindset there, because
Apparently OpenSSH missed QA too.
apparently
Oh,
but
Sent hate mail too.
QA people, some of them, any of them, used to test per spec, right? Okay, this is the spec, the thing is doing what the spec says, so the thing is good. I think that those that came to security and those that are good threat modelers were those that took the next step and said, okay, outside the spec, if we turn on the gorilla and bang the keyboard many times, repeatedly on a full moon, this thing breaks. Those are the ones that I really miss. Where have those people gone?
all right. Well, we have
They
to
were
reach some
replaced.
conclusions here. Like, what's our
They were
conclusion?
replaced by a very small shell script that runs a fuzzing utility.
Right? And no, and don't even get me started on developers and unit tests and how they like to write tests and then to code to tests and things like that. And no, that's
Do you
not
Test-driven
remember-
development?
I was going to say, yeah, do you remember test-driven development?
Still around.
Oh, yeah.
It's still floating around. In some languages, it's more prevalent than others.
Wasn't
but,
it part of XP? Twice
Extreme programming?
XP in the same. Yeah.
Windows XP.
No.
Windows XP
This time
too.
is extreme programming. Well,
Extreme
twice the
programming.
same acronym, different meanings, same episode. I'm getting
Welcome
good.
to technology. So we got to draw some conclusions here. So if I can conclude based on our discussion, we're just going to get rid of SSH. Perfect. Good conclusion.
And all the world comes crashing down. Because everyone needs shell access, so they go to Telnet.
Wait, everyone needs shell access. Why does everyone need shell access?
I'm kidding. Not everyone needs shell access. But those who do need it. When you need it, you need it.
I wish everyone needed shell access. Back in those days, people knew what the system was doing. It wasn't just like a bunch of connected dots programming APIs and libraries, and I have no idea what's going on under the hood. And if I need this thing to move faster, I'll just put bigger iron on it. I miss when people used to pay attention to what's happening in the shell.
So we need to get rid of SSH in cloud native environments. We need to get QA back into their desk and their job functions.
Actually, question. There must be some obscure tool out there that's going to be SSH next generation, and it's made of 1,000 modules written in Rust with a front in Go and something shiny on top of everything. Is there? Have you guys heard
If
of
there
anything like that?
is, if there is, that would be awesome. Let's be on the lookout for it. Anyone has any suggestions?
I mean, I think it's an architecture solution is how we get to the next generation. And it's an architecture that started back in the 90s of separating things and administering things in a controlled way versus an open way of saying we're just going to use the internet as our pathway to everything.
Well, OpenSSH doesn't require the internet. You're opening yet another can of worms about
Wait, it doesn't require the
exposing
internet?
systems. Doesn't.
What do you mean? It doesn't use
Well,
IP? Like you can use something
it
other
uses
than IP?
IP, but it uses IP, but it does not require you to be publicly facing on the internet.
Sure. Yeah. So just like
Right.
any other service. Yeah. No, I wasn't. But
And
what
in fact,
I
if it is, if you show up in Showdown, you've done it wrong.
Yep. Totally.
but that's it's easy to show up in Showdown now with SSH. The SSH default stance is people maybe that don't understand it as well as we do run it in a public way so that it's accessible on the public internet.
But it's not just SSH then. I mean, you're running SSH, you potentially have Telnet, you potentially have ICMP, because you're not running a firewall and you're not blocking on
but I
your
mean,
internet.
Telnet doesn't exist anymore. Let's. I mean, in the modern
Hopefully
world,
not.
hopefully you don't scan for Telnet. ICMP is a debugging protocol at the end of the day, right? Like it doesn't give you any.
It's
Yeah.
ping.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it was created for debugging. It doesn't. I don't have access to some data.
I guess
somewhere.
what I mean is, if you have a default configuration and you're not running a firewall and your network is internet facing and you're allowing inbound connections, you probably have more than SSH on the server.
Yeah, I see.
You may have etcd and you may have the Kubernetes API exposed, in fact, as we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
So it isn't just SSH that you have to worry about at that point.
Quick look at the alternatives to SSH. The only thing that's even remotely usable is that place that likes to divide everything into 4. They give as an alternative to SSH, they give you, what's it called? Privileged access management.
Oh, PAM.
Yeah.
No, but different PAM. Oh, a different PAM.
Different
use.
PAM. Different, two acronyms. Yeah. We're in a roll today. Yeah.
All right, we have to wrap it up.
All right, well, we'll have to continue to monitor the situation and see what happens.
So bottom line, everybody keep using SSH, but patch it.
Patch it. Put a firewall. Don't make it internet facing.
And look for an alternative. And someone invented an alternative that doesn't have the same legacy challenges that exist with SSH.
Interesting.
Well, we got to wrap it up. So once again, thank you for joining us around the security table. Shout out to our friends in Australia. Can't remember if it's Northern or Southern Australia.
Treadmills.
But people on treadmills, people in Raleigh, everybody else out there. We'll see you again soon for another episode of The Security Table.
The security table.
Dun, dun, dun.